welcome, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm great. I've been crazy. I'm punchy. I'm tired. My brain is in like, someone just got to squeeze it out. And I know you know how that feels. Um, oh, God, it's been a long day. It's been a long 9 weeks, and it's been a long, what, 6 years for you?
Right, right.
So
Anyway.
update us on what's going on with your case. What else is going on in New Hampshire? And then we want to land on the case in Nashua with Paula Johnson, and not really to get too deep into the weeds with law and stuff, but what people need to be looking for in a recount, what can go wrong and what they need to observe.
No, absolutely. Hang on a second. I'm pulling something up that you just triggered my desire to pull this up.
Uh-oh.
I had a Microsoft headache. My Microsoft, I use a Mac. So my Microsoft Word, I have the suite. They made me download it from their website and made it not work.
Oh,
So I had a whole bunch of folders I had to close out. So here we go.
okay.
All right. So my case. First, no update from the New Hampshire Supreme Court as of yet. It's been just past a month.
Okay.
There's 21 days till the presidential primary. They know, I know, everyone knows that the clock is ticking. So we have other issues that are ongoing. Your case in federal court, the Nashua case, both are relying upon some of the newly established case precedent that was released by the New Hampshire Supreme Court on November 29th at 9 a.m. before my oral arguments began. They released a opinion on redistricting in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And that fight was parallel to North Carolina.
Same thing.
Each of the states, see, every time they have a census every 10 years, I believe it's every 10 years, if there's a change in the population, it changes the redistricting. So each of the states has delegated to their state legislatures the responsibility to redistrict the state.
Okay.
So when one opposing party is in control and the other one loses, they sue each other. Nothing new. It's been ongoing a very long time. That's how they resolve their problems. They sue each other. So, but unfortunately, that's the lesson that I've learned, that unless we the people are armed with the basics in civics and how the courts work, you don't need to go to law school to learn the process that it takes. You know, if you're willing to dedicate 25 hours of your life to learn the process of standing up for your rights, there is a process, and it's been used against us for a very long time because we the people expected others to in our stead, that oath of office somehow would have kept them in line and would kept them in fidelity, and that the courts, and no, we've now woken up. You know, that song that was a big hit last year, right? Rich Men from Richmond, right?
Correct.
They want to know everything about you. They want to control your life. And then he such a powerful way says, I wish I could wake up and it not be true, but it is,
Yeah.
right?
Woken
And that's
up.
what,
True.
yeah, and that's where we're at now, is that we can't believe that all of this has come to pass, that the nightmare that we're living every day, day in, day out, as we're watching our society collapse around us. So yeah, that's the wake up call. So if you're not awake now, hopefully we don't have to suffer a whole lot more pain. Might I remind your audience that they were so desperate to get rid of Donald Trump, they released a bioweapon on the entire world in order to fix the 2020 elections.
Yeah.
And anyone that doubts that there was something wrong with the 2020 elections just needs to go to the New Hampshire Supreme Court.gov, right? Go look up New Hampshire.gov, go to the Supreme Court and look up my oral arguments, right? Case number, it's the last case. If you look up right on the homepage, live feed 2023-0097. And you tell me, you be the judge as to whether the state has made a compelling argument as to whether their statutory scheme today would have been applicable in 1784. Was there electricity in 1784? So
Well,
you mean the moderator to sort and count the votes would have meant what?
that he had to sort and count the votes, that you don't use the machines, you don't use electricity, you do as it actually is stated in the New Hampshire Constitution. You shall.
And was there two sets of additional eyeballs watching him do his job?
Yeah, and that ain't a machine because that's not a live living person.
And so the moderator is supposed to do what when he gets done with his count? Certify that and tell everyone that he has declared that his count, key, his count is fair and accurate. And then the clerk of the city does what? Swears that she witnessed or he witnessed the clerk do his job.
Correct.
And so, not a machine. So, yeah, they're in big trouble. They're in big trouble. And
They
the
are, and they're,
ballot,
sorry, go ahead.
no, and the ballot law commission too is the other big problem that they're going to run into is that, when the state's attorney was asked by the Supreme Court, well, what about the ballot law commission issue? Um, and we heard the mic cut. No, there was no, he went mute. He just, and then long pause. It lasted, he must have felt like eternity because I know it was at least 30 seconds. And then he starts shuffling his papers and then thinks and suspects and never really tells the court where it is they have any authority to exist.
Because they
And
don't. No
well,
authority, and the people that gave them the authority didn't have the authority to give it away, and now they're judge, jury, and executioner, and deciding in tribunals and administrative hearings stuff they're not allowed to decide.
no, it's all out of control. And, the court was really well prepared. Like I said, I didn't know at the time that they had really digested a good portion of my brief and adopted the Moore v. Harper precedent.
Yep.
That's what they cite the precedent that they are one, responsible for looking at the election law challenge, and two, that they have to be obedient to the state constitution and can't transgress the limitations and restrictions of both the state and federal constitutions. And that's really a big deal. And on that note, I would like to explain to your audience, if I've explained it before, I'll explain it again because a lot of people are having a hard time understanding this really important concept, this really important legal concept. For your members of your audience that follow the Second Amendment cases of the Heller decision in 2008, excuse me, the Heller decision in 2008, the handgun case in DC, which led to the Supreme Court changing and not changing, but altering and restoring the proper standard of review that your rights should be treated with. In other words, your rights is a no-go zone, right? They're written down in order to secure your rights so that your government will never go beyond those limits. That's why it's there, right? And so that was put in place. And so they said, why should it be treated differently? Why should a federal judge or a state judge sit and say, because of a terrible case that leads to a legal concept called Chevron deference, where the courts have been applying this test, this what's called the means end scrutiny test. They would apply a test to your rights and see how much of the public rights, in other words, government's interest at preserving the public's best interest, and apply some type of scale. And Heller changed all of that. They said, no, why in the First Amendment cases that we've heard before this court before, do we treat the First Amendment right, the freedom of speech? Why do we treat it differently than the Second Amendment? We shouldn't, because all of the rights in the Bill of Rights, all of the amendments to the Constitution, all of the rights written down in the federal Constitution are protected. That's why they're written down.
Yep.
And so,
and could you say that they're all equal as well? They're protected and they're all equal. One is not any better than the other.
And that's what Heller brings to the table as far as the standard of review. The problem was that Heller was not strict enough in its language in the opinion of the court, and a lot of the lower courts were getting it wrong.
Oh,
And when you learn how the US Supreme Court works as to how and why it takes cases, because it rejects a great many cases that comes before it, prioritizing those cases it feels are most necessary to resolve now.
okay.
And of course, that's a discretion that they exercise. It's their prerogative. Like it or not, it's the fact of the matter. And so many of the courts were getting that decision wrong. So last year or 18 months ago, there was a new controversy in New York State where members of a pistol club sued over these overly restrictive rights of the ability to transport their firearms from their home to the pistol range.
Yep.
And they sued and they sued and they won. And the Supreme Court cited Heller, and they said, listen, since the lower courts didn't get us the first time, we're going to give you paint by numbers. This is what you're going to do. When the plain text clearly identifies you as one of the people, the moment it does that, the burden of proof now shifts to the government. The government must now prove that its statutory scheme that it wishes to use today, that, for example, when dealing with the Second Amendment, if you restrict who can carry a gun and where, then you've automatically done what? Encroached upon the Second Amendment that says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, a statute that's written that says anything to do about your right to keep and bear arms it's an automatic trigger. Now we no longer where we were before. Prior to this decision, whenever you would have to go to court, it would be your proof of burden. You would have to prove your standard. The burden of proof is upon you to show your standing, to show how the government's action, when it believes it's a public right, that it is acting in the best interest of the public, that somehow is because a judge has made that decision, that he gets to decide, that he gets to override how much encroachment you should tolerate. And that's what changed the landscape. That's what's radically going to, this is why, if you watch my oral arguments, why the court just couldn't believe that this in fact might in fact be true. Because not only did I write it down, I articulated it to them. And so I think they got the crux of what I had to say. And so it applies to the Nashua case and your case. Why? Because in your case, you have what? You have a federal primary that's 21 days away.
Yep.
And the actions of the Secretary of State and the actions of the chairman of the GOP,
Yep.
right, Chris Ager, that they did not do. Chris did not follow, the chairman of the GOP did not follow the wishes of his committee, right? He has a fiduciary duty. He accepts an emolument, right? So that means he has a fiduciary duty to perform and act in the best interest of the committee,
Yep.
not to exercise some other random political agenda, because we're witnessing what this is potentially all about. We have Chris Sununu running around with Nikki Haley, and I don't begrudge his endorsement of a particular political candidate. My point is that they know all about the open primary. They know all about the fact that they did not close the primary. And looky here, who's really in charge of the GOP? Well, we're about to find out, aren't we, on Friday?
Yes, we are, actually.
And so that's what I've been trying to preach to all three of you, is the simple premise. You don't have to prove how you were injured. The fact of the matter is, Article 1, Section 2, the people of the several states, that's you. You get to elect your representatives. The 17th Amendment, you are one of the people. That means that is a federally protected right. The people themselves, as reserved under themselves when they wrote the U.S. Constitution, the right of the people to elect their federal representation. That automatically puts you in the driver's seat. That means that the state now has to prove that its statutory scheme that's on the books now, right?
Yep.
That what's the key that I've been teaching you? The process has to be followed. Now
Yep.
follow me. Follow me. Article 1, Section 4 is what Moore v. Harper is all about. So we talked about the Second Amendment cases. Let's move to Moore v. Harper. Moore v. Harper is all about the redistricting fight in North Carolina, just like New Hampshire. The
Yep.
Democrats are suing the Republicans. It's the same, right? It's the same story. The New Hampshire Democrats and the North Carolina Democrats are suing the New Hampshire Republicans and the North Carolina Republicans crying foul.
Yep.
So the Supreme Court of the United States says, look, you North Carolina Republicans were wrong. You are, in fact, bound by your state constitution. You don't get to do whatever you want. The U.S. Constitution clearly gives the legislature of North Carolina and the legislature of New Hampshire the
Yep.
responsibility to establish the time, the place,
And the
and
man.
the what? The manner. The manner is the process. So guess what you have? You have a federally protected right that they must follow the process. And the process says what? There are statutes on the books that require that in order for the primary to have remained open, they should have done what? Communicated that, right?
Correct.
And they didn't, did they?
So
No, they had a little top secret meeting where there's a little bit of chatting back and forth, right? They're making decisions, not following the rules. Well, just so your audience really appreciates this, I'm going to share with your audience what a recent court in Connecticut had to say. Two Democrats eating each other in Connecticut in the Bridgeport, Connecticut mayor's race, right?
Yeah.
So one of them just couldn't help themselves. His constituents love him so much they committed felonies. They loved him so much that they were caught on camera because the citizens of Connecticut were smart enough to put cameras, and the police put cameras up on the drop locations for the ballot drop locations for absentee ballots. And guess what? They had cameras inside of the polling place where they were stuffing these illegal, unverified absentee ballots into the machine. The judge had never seen nothing like it, but guess what he didn't do? He didn't grant a recount. He didn't grant a recount based on fraud. Get this, follow me. He didn't grant the recount on fraud. He granted it on failure to follow the process. Follow me. Whether fraud is, this is his quote, whether fraud has been committed in the handling of certain absentee ballots is irrelevant to the question of whether there's been a substantial compliance with all the mandatory provisions of absentee voting law. Had the legislature, and then he explains why he says that. He explains why. He said, had the legislature chosen to do so, it could have enacted a remedial scheme under which ballots would ... be invalidated only upon showing of fraud or other related irregularity, right? In other words, they would have told you what the standard of proof for fraud meant by statute. They would have established that, hey, if we catch you on camera, if you're caught on camera, that's evidence that you committed fraud. But they didn't do that. That's what he's saying.
Correct.
They didn't put in place a process of proving fraud as a violation of election process. He goes on to say, had the legislature chosen to do so, it could have enacted a remedial scheme under which the ballots would be invalidated only upon showing of fraud or other related irregularity or irregularity. The legislature has instead enacted a regulatory scheme designed to prevent fraud as far as practicable by mandating the way in which absentee ballots are to be handled, the manner, the process, right? The validity of the ballot, therefore, depends not on whether there's been fraud, but on whether there has been substantial compliance with the mandatory requirements.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
That's why all the Trump cases in 2020 and the other cases, they didn't go anywhere, because you were doing what? You were trying to prove standing when it wasn't your burden to prove.
Right.
Secondarily, Moore v. Harper wasn't on the books yet. We
Right.
didn't get that beautiful gift
Till
until
June.
this summer,
Yep.
in June 27th, right after I filed my brief.
Correct.
So, as I told the New Hampshire Supreme Court, it is because now Moore v. Harper has made it very, very clear that the manner or the judicial review is now in play, and both constitutions restrict the function of your state legislature.
I love it. Oh my God. Thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on and to have you. I'm super excited because you're all revved up tonight and I love it. And I just want to tell everybody, share, 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 and understand this. And we're going to have you back in a couple of weeks. Everybody pray, everybody, that the court's going to make a decision and that we, the people, are going to, we're going to win. We're going to hold them accountable as public servants. Blessings, blessings to you, Daniel. And I will be talking with you soon. Take care of those great dogs and thank you.
Be well, sister. God bless.
All right. Bye. Hello, hello, Miss Regina Barnes. How are you?
Well, I'm good, but unfortunately, I've been fighting with the internet the whole time, so I didn't even get to hear Dan. But
Oh, you'll be able to go to Rumble and see it right
yeah,
after. As
so
usual, he's on fire and he's just poking the bear, and I love it. And tonight was exceptionally good. He just really laid out the case. So, all right, girlfriend, it's your turn. What the heck is going on in your end of the state? What have you got to report for us?
well, my end of the state, right now, it's petition warrant article time. The deadline for that for town meetings is next week. So we got a big cell tower issue going on here. They want to plop it right down next to the school, even though it's completely against our local ordinance. So we got a big group of people that are working on that. They have a warrant article for that. I have a warrant article that I'm petitioning. I actually just got invited to go to the local GOP to do my view of the Town of Hampton 2024 budget proposal.
Nice.
So I'm preparing for that. And we're looking at the PPE loans right now, some of us. A lot of that money went to, Sununu's businesses. As we see, we got Andy Sanborn, who lost his license with the casino.
Yep.
That just came out this week or last week.
End of last week, I think.
This was supposed to be, remember we were calling it the Main Street loans or whatever, the Main Street 2.0 for small businesses.
Yep.
But when you look at who received the list, and I actually just found a site where you can do any state. Of course, I was focused on New Hampshire, but we're going to go and some of us are going to start filing some complaints about all this money going to politicians, how many law firms it went to. And then if you go and you review some of the articles specifically on Granite Grok written by Claire Best,
Yep.
She's done a lot of work about how all those law firms in Manchester are related with the ones in Boston. These guys are running the show. They are in our government. Lawyers shouldn't even be part of the government. They take a completely separate oath. Their oath is to the bar, the British Accreditation Registry. And as we see now, even our votes in this state, they're not even to the Constitution anymore.
Correct.
They're to the lowercase state, which is the corporation.
Correct.
And the reason why we're a corporation is because we've accepted all the federal fraud money over time.
Correct.
So there's a lot going on. And I, for one, I'm done with it. I don't acknowledge it anymore. I'm not going to let any of it to affect me individually, but I will keep getting involved so that we need to get the masses on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I hope that US debt clock that you showed earlier, that was pretty interesting, how they had the old money and the new money. Of
Yep.
course, this is what people have been talking about for a long time. And they don't, it's like they don't want to believe it, but that's what it's supposed to be. Our currency is supposed to be backed by some type of a commodity.
Right.
Gold and silver, that's the standard. US Treasury, that is supposed to be the department that's responsible, not the Fed Reserve.
Correct.
So this is all coming out to light. You know, my father, he was a bank, my father was a regulator. He was the #2 guy in the nation for the secretary, for the Department of the Treasury when he retired
Hmm.
out of DC. And when he retired, the main reason why he retired was because Obama had merged the Fed Reserve regulatory agencies with the Treasury Regulatory Agency, which was what my father was the director of. It was Office of Thrift Supervision. They operated in the black, not at a deficit. And Obama merged them with the OCC, and my father didn't want anything to do with it. And that's when he retired. Now I know why.
Yep.
Because he didn't want anything to do with the Fed. So, you know, it's like we all come into this, I feel like, for a reason.
Hmm.
And it's so much, I just hope that 2024 is just one big wake up, especially for New Hampshire.
I'm hoping there's fireworks every week. Every night would be good, but every week would be exceptionally wonderful. You know, here's another truth. Here's another exposure here, because
Right.
we
And
are.
then you got, yeah, and then you got Mike Gill, who's been doing this for almost 20 years, and they're going around, they're calling him a liar.
What else are they going to do? Liar, liar,
You
pants.
know, it's like,
You blame it on somebody else, exactly what you're doing, which is what we're looking at, you know, with the dirty cabal. They accuse us of doing exactly what they're doing.
exactly. So that they're almost like calling themselves out every time they do that. Hopefully more and more people will see it. You know, help get Mike Gill's information out, that too. You know, that I've been trying to work on that. But like I said, I'm going to start letting people know about, you can look up by city and town who got this PPP loan money.
Yep.
Now, this was when the state was shut down and they were giving this money out. And then meanwhile, you get the coffee shops and these little small mom and pops that they got maybe $5,000 if they were lucky.
If
And
they
then
were.
you got millions going to Sununu and Shaheen and Dick Anagnost and all these property development companies and all these law firms.
Hospital.
Hospitals, yes, hospitals, mental health facilities. Why are we putting all that money there? So we can spend it. That's why. And that's how they want to spend it. With their agenda, it's all agenda driven. And it's all fraud. Like, and Dan, you know, Dan had a case for that, just for the federal funds, accepting those, borrowing on our behalf. Hello, I never gave you permission to do that.
Correct, which ties into when I was talking about, you know, in the debt clock, it'll say what each taxpayer, not American, but taxpayer, owes because of what they've spent. I'm sorry, where did I say that you could steal my money from my paycheck, use it for purposes not intended, money launder it, and then give my money, our tax money back to the state we live in, and then say to the governor and the lieutenant governor and or the executive council, depending on what kind of state you live in, that, oh, by the way, wink, wink, nod, nod, okay, we're going to lend you this money back, and you're
Right.
going to pay us back, and just sign on the dotted line that the taxpayers of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, whatever, are going to pay us back. I'm sorry, you stole our money, you money laundered it, you sent it back to my state, and I'm having to repay it. It was my money you stole from the beginning. And oh, by the way, there's 7 billion, you know, little ties attached to that of what you're going to do and not going to do. And these freaking governors and people are saying, yeah, we're gonna sign for the people. in your state and they're going to pay
And that's
you back.
and specifically for elections, I just, Brenda from Voter Integrity reached out. I don't know, it was like right before Christmas or after Christmas, and they're working on, doing 91As about elections. They found so much in New Hampshire for the 2020 election that no one, some people, they don't want to listen to it. Like, it's right there. You can go to their website. All the fraud they found is there. People that hadn't lived in the state for over 5-10 years, they're still voting here. Hello.
Yep.
What, there's something wrong there. So she knew that I was doing some 91As in regards to the COVID funds. And I told her it's sort of a mess. Like, I probably have over 100 emails. They sort of gave me what I asked for, but the Secretary of State actually gave me the complete request. And
Wow.
I forwarded that off to her. And right in those election grants that we got from the US Election Agency, or whatever the hell it's called, it says right in there, use of funds. Specifically, it's to expand absentee ballots. Now, we know that's right there. It's right in there. I sent it all off to Brenda. And then I also, because some current event came up, so I actually wrote a blog about it a day or two later because of something I saw on my news feed. And then we go back. Now, Dan also has a case against this, right? And then they don't even do what they're supposed to do with the absentee ballots, which they're supposed to all be sworn to by affidavit. That hasn't happened since what,
Right.
the 70s?
Correct.
So we get awarded that federal grant money. And I believe it was April of 2020, the letter came to the Secretary of State. It was like 4 million. It wasn't like a ton of money, 3.7 million or something.
That's a lot.
But right in there, it says, expand absentee ballots, all this, all the procedures, get the pens that you can throw away, all the crap. And then in July of 2020, so 4 months later, that's when Sununu signed that House Bill 1266 into law that expands absentee ballots for COVID, because he had to, because we took the money.
Took the money, right?
So 1 + 1 is 2, right? You take the Fed funds, you got to do the dirty deed. Now that bill, because the State House was closed for the pandemic, that bill was presented by that election committee that was put together. It was like a couple senators and a couple state reps. Sherman was on it. I remember he was my senator at the time. I was running against him then. And he was on there. So the Senate passed it and the governor signed it into law. But if you go on to the text, the history of the bill on Legiscan, the House never concurred with the bill.
They bypassed them and put it right into the Senate.
So and I remember that now, but I had forgotten about it till I went back and looked. So the Senate passed it 24-0, whatever it was. Maybe 3 people said no, I can't remember. And then the governor signed it and it didn't go to the House for concurrence. So that's how shady our government is. And as far as, worrying about who's going to be governor, well, guess what? I already consider our state to not have a governor. And I've considered that since 2021 when we went to the state capitol and fired them all.
Yep.
And it's apparent now that he's not our governor anymore. He's running for Nikki Haley's vice president seat.
Correct.
He's going there tomorrow. This state is turned into a shit show dump. And he's going to campaign with Haley tomorrow in Iowa.
What?
Yeah, that's what I just read on that Kevin Landrigan guy from Union Leader or whatever.
Union Leader, yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm pretty sure that's what I read today. She was in Rye tonight, I believe. And this guy is like, and then, so people need to realize that I hope we don't even have an election in next November. But if we do, we better not just vote for these people because they have a freaking R next to their name.
Correct.
And if they get endorsed by Sununu, it should be a #1 sign to vote against them. Leave it blank. And And I can let you know that I have to get an absentee ballot for the presidential primary because I'll be out of town. So I'm going to play by their rules. But I'm going to be doing a little game with my ballot.
Good for
So
you.
I'll keep the public posted on that because I want to
I'm
make sure that my absentee ballot gets counted.
Absolutely. Are you good? So let's just quick talk about, notarizing, because Daniel talks about it all the time. If you have to notarize something, a document to go to court, you have to go to the bank, your town hall,
Right.
whatever, and have a
Exactly.
notary or a JP sign and attest to, under pains and penalty and
Right.
perjury, that that is your signature, and they watched you sign that document
Exactly.
in front of them. That is the only way that a document is actually legit, that it's an
Exactly.
affidavit, that it's been sworn to. But we have got millions of absentee ballots that people sign away and go, yep, that's my signature. Well, nobody's watching.
Right.
They're doing it in their bathroom, they're doing it in their bedroom, they're doing it in the kitchen, they're doing it in their wherever.
Right.
And I don't understand how we're held, for official documents to have them notarized properly, that that's our signature, but
Right.
absentee ballots are not. It's like
Right.
you need, we have to show up with a proper voter ID, a license, but they're not showing anybody a license. They're not proving that they've got a picture ID with their name and it's been validated. We're talking about discrimination on an extreme level.
Extreme level. And that's why, when we went around, we drove around the state and we notified all our sheriffs and we notified all our county clerks and the governor and all those guys. Those were all signed off and notarized by a notary that witnessed our signature.
Yep.
And that is that's an affidavit. Like people are like, oh, an affidavit. That is a sworn an affidavit is a sworn notarized statement.
Correct.
So don't let the courts think that you need to go out and get like an affidavit form. All as you need is to swear to something in front of a notary. Obviously, it has to be up-to-date notary, whatever. And that's it. That's an affidavit.
Try
So
and go to court with, oh, I got one right here. I signed it. Look, wait a minute, watch. I signed it. Wait a minute. We don't even get to see people at the house signing it. So that's an affidavit more than what half these people are doing on an absentee ballot.
So if we didn't count absentee ballots in the 2020 election, then that probably would have
changed the outcome.
Changed the results quite a bit. But actually, we shouldn't really count any absentee ballots. Because they haven't been done
properly executed.
Right. And they're not supposed to be what? If you're really, really ill, or you're like away, like in the military and you're overseas.
Right. Or religious exemptions, and which I don't agree with, because no one to date has been able to explain to me what religion doesn't allow you to vote.
Yeah, I've never heard of a religion. I've never had someone tell me their religion,
But that's what the religious exemption is. And Tuesday is not a religious holiday, that it never has fallen on a religious holiday. So I don't understand that at all.
It should be a national holiday that everyone has off. That
Correct.
I agree. I agree with doing that.
I agree too. That should be a national holiday, period. That's the only thing that you do.
And I think that we need to make it so that eventually we have all our elections are all on one ticket. So when we vote for president, we're voting whether or not we want to spend $5 million on a town project. Because these town elections, the amount of people that are showing up is minuscule compared to the amount of registered voters in every town. And it's because most people just don't care. So either the people have to start caring, or we need to merge all the elections to happen at one time. Because if you can only get people motivated to go vote once a year, then have everything on one ballot.
In most cases, once every 4 years at this point.
Right, but with the midterms, You know, like you can't, they separate the towns and the cities out on their own election, and they're able to pass things on a lesser margin because most people don't even know that they have a city and town election.
Correct. Well, somebody had put out, I know on social media up here, that, everybody fill in what is your local, towns, what day are you, doing your school elections? What day are you doing your town elections? In my town, it still says 2023.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the local GOP actually made a magnet that has like all the town election, the primary, all the dates on it, which is cool.
It
But
is.
yeah, most people don't know that information. So, but I feel like they have it like, why do we have our elections in March? Like, why don't we have them in the summertime when everyone in the town is
Everybody can
here?
show up. Rain,
They
snow.
do that on purpose. I'm sorry. You know, like why I want to vote when all the snowbirds are here,
Correct.
which is in the summertime.
Correct.
Their primary residence is Hampton. They just go to Florida for the winter.
Yep. So why
So
should the few decide for the many? Because that's a democracy and we're a republic. So we need to stick to those rules that keep us as a republic.
right, not mob rule, which is the way they call it, which is what we have now.
All right, my dear. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm sorry you had such problems with your internet, but I'm glad it was able to stay on while we were talking. And,
Yes,
have you back in a couple of weeks. Just let everybody know that Friday, 9:30, it got changed at the federal courthouse. They're going to be hearing our case, and everybody needs to be there and understand what's going on with our elections, with the primary in New Hampshire, and what the state law says, and what other people are changing it to match what they want and not what the state law says.
exactly.
Love it. All
All
right,
right.
my dear.
Thanks.
Have a
All
great
right.
night. Okay?
Happy New Year.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Thank you.